Hello, I'm Sean Millerick, and this is Marlins After Dark. Why? Because no team keeps you up late at night like the Miami Marlins. The 1-11 history-making Miami Marlins, tying the worst start in franchise history. Um, we'll get into that in tonight's show. Basically, a week ago, and just the rundown for today. We're gonna get into the most recent news of Skip Schumacher. Might touch briefly on the game tonight, but really just kind of want to do a redo of last week's podcast when I expressed some hope, some optimism, some positive thinking towards the franchise. That was, I guess, at 0-6. And I'm coming around a little bit. Lots happened in the past week. Uri Perez, season-ending surgery to Tommy John, many more losses, and the most recent news with Skip. The Marlins, of course, did fall tonight to the Yankees, second loss in a row to the Yankees, ending up at 1-11. We could talk about the game, but as to use the catchphrase of the season, I'd just like to skip that. Just like to skip it and move right into the most recent news with the Marlins manager before just kind of taking the gloves off and getting airing my feelings on what's going on with the franchise right now, what the state of things currently is, touching on just some comments I've seen on social media. So this will be what I hope is, I guess, my real final venting, and then we could look forward to what's really looking like a whole year of, I guess, breaking down the upcoming Major League Draft and next year's Major League Draft and maybe the Major League Draft after that, and getting really freaking pumped for the 2028 version of this team. But let's start with Skip. The story broke just on the weekend, Sunday, as the Marlins are putting the touches on their first win. The news breaks via everyone's favorite and most reliable source of news, Bob Nightingale, that Skip Schumacher had his option declined by the Marlins. And you can understand if it was Skip's choice to decline it, and he did so. But that the Marlins went out of their way to decline the option of the reigning National League Manager of the Year. And in the theories, recriminations started flying left and right. And today we have a pretty good sense of what transpired. I think more is due to come out tomorrow via Craig Mish through the Miami Herald, so that the 25 option, the option for 25 was voided, and by the Marlins, and it was at Skip's request. That Skip was essentially pissed over what went down this offseason, when very shortly after a successful postseason run, kind of turning around baseball in South Florida, that the person who put him in that position to begin with, who clamored the loudest for him to do so, Kim Ng, former general manager. Kim Ng, part of a long list of former general managers of the Miami Marlins, was shown the door and let go, and the direction of the franchise changed. And that set off some alarm bells for Skip, it would seem. Felt perhaps a sense of betrayal. Maybe he felt that as if he was brought in under false pretenses, as it turned out, into South Florida to begin with. And the reason he felt that way, I would imagine, is because he was brought in under false pretenses. It would seem that he was brought in to lead a team that he was probably told that there was a window opening, that there was a chance to contend going forward, that this would be a team that was going to be added to over time, that was on the cusp of greatness, and that maybe he could be part of the story to get Miami over the hump, to turn a franchise around that had known, rough times for quite a while, get them to that winning season, get them to the playoffs. Maybe that was part of it, the excitement to do that. And you would have to assume, that was the case, to get him to take a position so far away from where his family is. As we all know on here, Skip's family is West Coast based. Seems to have a lot of general fondness for the West Coast area in general, but principally, his family is there. It's a lot to be away from your family for any length of time. I have not been in the position of managing a Major League Baseball team. but I have been in the position of having to work at least away from my wife for a period of time, and a couple of times in our careers, and during our marriage, and kind of figure you can make anything work for a year. Kids, I can't imagine being in that situation. It's not been an issue for me, thankfully, since the birth of my children. And but even then, I guess still maybe the theory that you can make anything for a year applies. I think it's a good probably rule of thumb professionally. And if you tack on the millions of dollars that and privilege and status that comes with having a job that is one of 30 that exist in the world, then okay, maybe you can do that for two. And I would suspect that part of the decision to ask the Marlins to go ahead and allow for this opt-out was perhaps to allow him the opportunity to head back. And maybe that was always going to be the case. If over the course of 2 years that he had not fallen head over heels in love with the Miami area, and in love and in lockstep with the direction that the franchise was going, then maybe that would become a longer term move. I don't think this is going to be an instance where he was just going to stay perpetually apart, from his family for that length of time. And I don't want to speak, for him. And certainly many professional athletes, could make, similar things work. But just, to ask him, to do that, to be away from his family, and then to pull the rug out from under him like this, to leave him with this kind of lame duck season that's really going to amount to very little. Window dressing of the Titanic is really looking like the fate of the 2024 Marlins, whatever they accomplish on the field, particularly if it's looking more and more likely that he's not going to be here to realize the fruits of whatever labor and efforts he puts into this team, whatever coaching up and teaching and inspiration that he instills in this upcoming crop of young players who I expect we'll see more and more of over the course of the season. He's not getting anything out of that, unless, of course, his future franchise trades for them, from the Marlins. So I would just, I keep going back, to that. Just there must really be a bit of a sense of betrayal, and it could be a bit dramatic. I mean, it's a business. All of these players and coaches know that, particularly managers that were former players, are aware of how cold-blooded this system, this business can be. But it's just maddening as a Marlins fan, to see this take place. And Skip certainly seems like one of the best managers, and he's widely considered to be that. This is not a case where just popular within the clubhouse. It's throughout the game. You see pundit after pundit, coming out, just recognizing that he is one of the rising talents in this game, and will have no trouble, finding work, somewhere else, even if the Marlins only win 50 games this season. He's going to be fine. It's just, but to see how these managers are treated, and so certainly Bruce is only technically, I guess, responsible for how managers under him have been treated, and that has been well, at least to date. Don Mattingly was the longest tenured Marlins manager. That seemed to, was given a fair amount of chances to succeed, and Skip at least publicly keeps saying that that Sherman has been nothing but great to him and to his family. But if that's, you just can't get past the fact though that this is the second time that the Marlins in their history have decided to not extend a Manager of the Year winner, and to move on pretty quickly from one who achieved that award. That it's not easy to get. This is the second time that the Miami Marlins, as an organization in their history, has done a really dramatic or almost overnight change of direction on a big name manager they brought in, to run the team, telling them that it's going to be a winning team and we're locked into, chasing pennant after pennant, and then we're actually just going to tear the whole thing down and rebuild. You're okay coaching up the kids, right? And then we're left with this scenario where if there is a new manager in opening day 2025. It's going to be the 15th different manager in Marlins history, and that this is most likely going to be the third manager underneath the fourth owner, and underneath that fourth owner's third general manager, player, president of baseball operations, captain of the capital C, whatever the hell you want to call it, whoever runs the team. And just the lack of stability is just maddening. It makes you want to pull your hair out. And there's zero permanency, not even the colors, as everyone likes to carp on about, on the socials. There's no, the baseball team's name ends in Marlins. That's about it. And it's physically located south of Boca. And other than that, what the hell? There's no stability with this team. There'll probably be another manager running the team at the start of next season. And I don't know, I guess, good chance that manager's already in the system. I'm sure that Gabe Kapler is great coaching up the kids. It's super cool that he's swole AF. And he seems to be great on the socials, but optics matter. And it's just the fact that there's this much instability. It's just ridiculous. And it's one of the many things that helps to make the Marlins one of the laughing stocks of the league, which they would be. They would be the laughing stock of baseball right now if it wasn't for the saving grace of the Oakland A's or the Sacramento A's or the Las Vegas A's, whatever, the team that should not be called the A's anymore because of what they did to that poor city. It could always be worse. We could be Oakland. If it wasn't for that, and for the fact that apparently every pitcher's elbow is about to explode, that's dominating the headlines, this would be the only story. How pathetic this is, that a team that made the playoffs last year did so desperately, depressingly, soul-crushingly little to improve the roster and have a roster that you could expect and put money on and feel confident about, that they were going to contend going into this season. They have a puncher's chance of getting back to the postseason, having a winning season for 2 years in a row for the first time this decade, or previous decade, to make the postseason for the 2 times in a row for the first time in franchise history, to do any of those constructive things that build fans, that encourage more and more people to come out to the ballpark over time. Because the truth is that just the fans deserve better. You deserve better. If you're desperate enough about the Marlins to be listening to this, either live or when you're going about your day in the morning, coping with another loss, I imagine, and just praying, at least thanking your lucky stars that the Heat didn't lose, that would have just been the chef's kiss on the last week. It's that just the fact that this team of ours, that and under Sherman, that you deserve better, that it's just made impossible for you to embrace them, to support them, reliably. I'm wearing the jersey proudly wearing my only real official jersey. The name on the back of this, it says Ichiro. And I bought this in 2017. And I bought this jersey because I felt confident that, he was probably not going to finish his career in a Marlins uniform, but I saw him do some really cool things in a Marlins uniform, and it wasn't going to be a case of me having to watch some other, superstar go on and make their Hall of Fame case playing for another team after the fact, after leaving Miami, after being plucked away. Ichiro, could just remember him hitting his 3,000th hit in a Marlins uniform, and cool. And I'm happy to have that. I was given my choice of jerseys after the 2016 season. I remember thinking, well, Stanton, no. Yelich, no. Ozuna, no. Realmuto, no. Can't trust it. The next jersey I get, it's probably just going to have my name on the back. I'm just going to give up on buying something with a player's name on it. Unless Griffin gets called up and gets to wear his dad's number, then I'll buy that jersey day of. And never just frame it properly. But the fact that this owner did nothing to meaningfully improve the roster, to meaningfully improve the league worst offense in the National League, They played tight. They rallied together. They rallied behind Skip Schumacher. They believed in each other. The clubhouse culture changed for the better. There's abundant evidence that all of that is what transpired. And even as unsustainable as some of their success last year might have been, and as perhaps proof of concept that maybe this team actually, last year's team, maybe they secretly did really suck, or there is something lacking in them with this 1-11 start. It's hard. It makes it a little hard, I guess, to bang the table. But just even if they had gotten off to the same start, but they had done so with an improved roster, the tune would be very different. It would still be at least talking about an ownership that tried a little bit, tried to about the extent that maybe they're capable of trying, even though they're never going to try at the level of the Mets or the Phillies or the Braves or even 15 other teams in Major League Baseball. But why can't they be in that 16 to 20 range in salary? Why can't they be the middle of the pack in salary that I'm pretty sure the Miami Marlins franchise promised the Miami City Commission that they would be at one point in time? I mean, if you go back to the qualifying offer, the lack of qualifying offer that Sherman made to Jorge Soler, for less money than would have been paid to Jorge Soler, you could have added Michael Lorenzen and JD Martinez, to this roster. And that few million you save, you could have pocketed or lopped it off of Tim Anderson's contract. Still, just little bit more money put in. Could have been a deeper roster. One was that improved, for pennies relative to past seasons of free agency. All the depth that has been celebrated on this team. I've said it aloud that this roster feels a little bit deeper, that there are a few bats in the minor league levels that you'd like to see brought onto this team. And that is true, but it could be deeper still, way deeper. And, much more capable of changing a game in one swing. That is sorely lacking. Still, from this lineup. Yeah, for pennies, they didn't need to add a superstar this season to make that sentiment possible. And even so, saying that, if there was ever a season to add a superstar, there were so many bullshit contracts handed out to all of the Boras, group that were the kind of deals that if the Marlins were ever going to do it and sign a big name free agent, that it was going to have to be one of these deals, one of these things with multiple opt-outs where some player, just bet on themselves and turned around and then cashed out. It's what the Soler contract actually was, in the end. But yeah, that would have been really unrealistic. This is not the podcast that's just pissed that Sherman didn't sign Matt Chapman or didn't, sign Cody Bellinger, because that's realistic. But you could have got Martinez. You could have got Lorenzen. You could have got probably a slightly better starter, than Lorenzen in concert with Martinez. These were not earth-shaking contracts that were signed this season. And if we get rid of all that, I said it last week in the pod, why aren't J.D. Davis and Gio Urshela on this roster? Why aren't they the bench? It could have been so much better. Heard the point made on a very, I think, cathartic Marlin Spaces by a Fish on First this weekend. I forget the name of who came out and said it. The point was raised that the Marlins can't even spend as much as the Panthers in this market. That the hockey team, which we're going to call hockey maybe charitably the distant third most popular sport in the United States, and it's probably really fourth or fifth. I'll say there's a chance it's third for the benefit of the hockey diehards that are watching this. That stings that they don't spend as much as the Panthers. Now, I mean, there's the only problem I had with that comment is that since the NHL is capped and the salary cap is as low as it is in the NHL because it's not the first, second, or third or fourth most popular sport in the United States, that the money spends differently. Matthew Tkachuk's going to earn, I think, $11 million this year for the Panthers. That doesn't buy you Avi Garcia in Major League Baseball necessarily, with its complete lack of a salary cap. So those dollars spend different, in a cap league. But still, that's think it's more than fair to call out the lack of spending. When your owner goes out in front of cameras last spring and says, I've got money, I'm going to spend it, and doesn't in a meaningful level. And you've never seen your team. You've seen your team do it twice. And one time they tore that team down 2/3 of the way through the season. One time they did win a World Series. So I guess there is that. But so that this team won't spend. And the reason they won't spend money is because they don't give a shit about you. And they don't give a shit about me. And it's not just Bruce Sherman, by the way. This is Major League Baseball, too. To the fans of any franchise, who are the kinds of fans who watch podcasts like this, who watch podcasts like others that are much more popular than mine, but still fan-driven podcasts. If you've been pouring your heart out, if you've got a closet full of merchandise, if you think opening day is a holiday, and should be an excuse day from work, Major League Baseball does not give a shit about you, because you're not going to change your mind. You're going to keep watching. You're going to keep watching, even if your team has not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but however many freaking fire sales it takes to line the coffers and get, and to, as cheaply as possible, chase titles, let owners show off their flashy toy that they own a Major League franchise. Because the system allows for them to do that. The system allows for tanking. The system allows for this level of competition. You've started to see some noise, rumors, stories circulating around that maybe 1 or 2 Major League owners around the campfire have complained about the A's and just the way they've handled their whole process. The fact that they're going to let a Major League team play for 3 years in a AAA stadium. It's pretty ridiculous. It's pretty pathetic. It's probably more pathetic than what's going on now with the Marlins. But the system allows for this to transpire. So while I would love to spend a whole 30, 40 minutes, an hour a season, and we'll probably kind of spend the whole season roasting Bruce Sherman for this, it's kind of letting other people off easy just to blame Sherman. Saw the point made in an article last week that there are other owners. It's not just Sherman. Sherman is not Steve Cohen. He's got many investors, many minority owners that are part of this team. And what about them? Maybe what about one of those others, 15, 16, 17 other minority owners that have stakes in the Marlins? What if 10 or 11 of those people decide that maybe winning is actually worth a damn? That actually competing is actually more important. Maybe we could afford to lose a little bit of money to make some more money down the line. Maybe we're rich enough just to have some fun with a winning team instead of just a flashy status symbol and a way to just steal money from good people's pockets to line our own when we don't really need it. It's just ridiculous. Because again, we're not changing our mind. What Major League Baseball is after, what Sherman is after, by pursuing this rebuild approach, is after the more fans, the different fans, the ones that aren't going to come, that aren't going to tune in, that aren't going to, pout and maybe not buy merchandise for a little bit or not buy tickets for a season, but are going to come back because we love this team. We're passionately followed since the beginning. If you've endured all this, you're going to endure this too. This is not going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back for enough to move the needle. For some of you, it might be. I think we actually heard from someone who it pretty much was the case for them on the Fish on First Bases over the weekend. And good for that person. Part of me wishes I could be, that person who actually could turn it off, but not just kind of a decided quality, I guess. And we all are. If you're listening to this, you're a decided quality on this. But Major League Baseball doesn't care. They want more money. They want the people who have never watched baseball, to tune in. The people who are going to just, all of a sudden magically become season ticket holding Marlins fans or season ticket holders for 29 other teams, because the next hot prospect that's called up and paid pennies, comparative to the rest of the league salary, becomes the next superstar for 4 years before they become unaffordable. Or before they enter arbitration and then start to become slightly less desirable. in terms of trade targets. And that's just the lot we've drawn, for this system. If only the system, could do something about it. If only Major League Baseball would do something about it. If only the other owners would hold their other owners accountable, and with something with real teeth, meaningful consequences. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think baseball would just explode and end if anything like the floor, the cap, or the penalties were put in place. Don't know who would freak out first, the MLBPA or the owners, to really flip a coin. But something needs to give, but I just don't know if it ever will. In terms of my bottom line, do I just put a bow on it? Marlins fans deserve far better than Bruce Sherman, and they deserve far better than Jeffrey Loria. And A's fans deserve a hell of a lot better than John Fisher. And hopefully one day they get it. A couple other things to round off. So that's probably about as intense as I'll get. Also seen a lot of shots fired for Peter Bendix during all this. And has a single move that Peter Bendix has made thus far on the field paid dividends? No. So, I guess that's fair, to point out. But I think it's a little early to just completely lump Peter Bendix in with Bruce Sherman. Whether he's, want to call him the general manager, the president of the baseball operations, the big man in the front office. Because, it's pretty clear at this point that he's playing the long game of his transactions. We really can't make a verdict on Bendix entirely until we find out whether whoever he picks first in the 24 and 25 MLB draft, whether they see whether or not they turn into the next Connor Scott and Tyler Kolek, or I guess whether they're the next Bryce Harper or Jackson Holliday. The big degree of proven difference between those two, but Holliday's in the news today, so that name came out. It's need to judge him by his drafts, by his draft picks, by the players that he develops. I guess I would put it as simply as this. Do you think that it seems that I think at least some Marlins fans out there seem to think that he just he really wants to do this, to everything that he's been forced to do. He took this job and was given a budget. Now could he have maybe clipped his coupons in a slightly different way and fit like a another couple $1 million MLB proven player onto the roster? Yeah, I think so. Could you make the case that maybe a trade could have happened sooner? Perhaps, but I do kind of want to get to that. I'll get to that at the end, why I think that hasn't happened to the extent that it has. But it's not as if this man really believes in his heart of hearts that he has spreadsheet after spreadsheet, telling him that, Jonah Bride is better than Matt Chapman. Or so, that's not what happened. He might be guilty of believing that Jonah Bride's a better MLB player right now than Tristan Gray. And okay, there might be mounting evidence that that's not true. But he probably doesn't believe that. He probably doesn't believe that Avisel Garcia belongs on a major league roster, but I'm pretty sure he's been told that he has to be there. And that it is what it is. Or at the very least, it's just a dry mathematical exercise of the fact that there's a 0% chance that you could ever move even $1 of Avisel Garcia's contract if you cut him, and there's a 0.5% chance that you can move some of Avisel Garcia's contract if you put him on the field long enough and he hits 280 in May or something, and then maybe you can flip him and do that, one of those fabled bad contract swaps that we've dreamed about for. We're going into our third year of dreaming about that. But it could be that simple. That just basically Sherman chooses to be the villain and is the villain. If there is a villain, in this story, he's the villain that MLB allows him to be, but there's a lot of choice there as a billionaire. Even if you need 17 other friends to own the baseball team, you're the owner. You're the bad guy. Bendix has a clear boss, and follows orders. I don't think, if Sherman was in a position to be talked into by his GM that this is actually a team that could compete and we should add on to it and spend more money, Kim Ng would still have a job with the Miami Marlins. In terms of what the current plan is or direction for the franchise, just to play devil's advocate at the very end of this, I don't necessarily believe much of what I'm about to say, but I would throw out that it's possible that the plan was to compete again this year at some level. Both Bruce Sherman and Peter Bendix have gone on record saying that they want to consistently compete. Now, does that always mean make the playoffs? Does that always look like a winning record? But consistently compete. So you can probably, intuit that to mean, 75 wins, on average, that at 75 at the worst. So keeping credible major leaguers always on the roster, players that are worth watching, showing up to watch, to do exciting things. But maybe contend. Maybe it's 80 wins. Maybe it's hoping that if the whole league goes to hell again, like it did last year, that there's a path, to that 6 wildcard spot. And I think a big part of that plan could have been waiting for cheap deals, waiting for all the cheap deals that were on the table right till the very end of free agency, the ones that were there for the Marlins to take multiple of, and they only ended up taking one in Tim Anderson. And then that's when, injury hell happened. The Marlins, as I think Alex Krutchik brought it up at the end of the spaces this weekend, and might have been mentioned again on a regular episode for them, that they're down 4 starting pitchers. I mean, we really can't overlook that. If you count Sandy, they're down 4 starters, from last year's rotation, and that's like no team really overcomes that. It's not just the Marlins that don't overcome it. Like no team, does. The Dodgers would be, they score 100 runs a game still, but their pitching would still suck. In that situation, it's just, so with that, I think what could have happened, one possibility, I just collecting my thoughts on this, so I want to phrase this right. I think one possibility is that, so the plan was to contend and to wait for a bunch of those cheap deals and then to kind of load up on them. But then once all those injuries transpired, that basically then Sherman and Bendix pulled the plug on their own uninspired, not the best. Certainly, not something that they wanted to put on all the season ticket literature, but, they pulled the plug on their own uninspired plan, to half-ass it, fake it till you make it, play with the cheapest, parts available, and to see if that would improve the roster. And there was a reason to believe that could work, right? With how bad shortstop and catcher were for the Marlins last year, with how bad their offense was last year, that just adding a few useful pieces should kind of, move the needle perhaps. But with, the plug being pulled on that, and then we're left with the fact that these pieces are still here. Like there was a good week, in the off season, where right before the season started, where you still could have then, okay, well, wow, for 80% of the starting rotation is hurt. Let's trade everybody. And then, and then just go into the rebuild. So I think the fact that everyone, for the most part, everyone but John Birdie, who it just really sucks watching him play in another team's uniform, that everyone except for John Birdie is still here, probably means one of two things. One, it means that there's still the possibility that there is a plan to have the team be worth watching again in 2025. That they're holding a hope that they can do that. This thing, can turn around. That there's still a greater than zero chance, even that maybe Skip Schumacher is intended to be a part of that. That they're going to, spend a year proving that, there are players, worth developing. That if a couple, breakouts happen the right way, and those players could line up along with Sandy, in 2025, and in an off season that might have more opportunities at positions of dire need. And that is one thing that this offseason didn't have. that I think in the frustration of them not spending any MLB money until March when they signed Tim Anderson, you know, you got to remember that the Marlins' biggest needs were shortstop and catcher, and that unlike years of free agency prior, the options all pretty much sucked, at shortstop and catcher. And the Marlins are a team that could really only afford, if they're going to ever kind of go for it, on a contract, especially after the lesson of Avisail Garcia, which is apparently going to hang over this franchise for the rest of Bruce Sherman's days. They're ever going to spend anywhere close to that kind of money on a player again, they basically need to be Sandy Alcantara, who makes less, than Avisail Garcia, or that's at least going to need to be a player that fills like the most glaring, obvious need. And there could be some more talent available at catcher and shortstop, in the next year. Whether it's shaking loose via trade, whether even a Willie Adames does hit the free agent market for the Brewers, he would have far and away been the best shortstop available this year. So that possibly does exist. They could keep a lot of these pieces, get everyone healthy, and have, much, stronger roster heading into 2025, getting Uri back, hopefully at the end, back third of that season as well. So maybe that's happening. I don't really believe that's what's going to happen, but it could still be what's going to occur. What I actually think is happening goes back to the Birdie trade. And I think I partly touched on this last week, so I apologize if I did. But so again, Jon Berti was traded at super max value, not just for Berti. That's more, I think, what I touched on last time when I have spoken about it, is that he's probably played his best season. But so what I think Bendix kind of did was he waited for a team to be truly desperate enough to move the best prospect possible that you'd get for a Jon Berti. And I think he might just be doing that with any of the pieces that he sees as not, essential, to holding on to. So to really any piece that's not named, or just super cheap for so long that you have to hold on to them. So like Uri Perez, Jake Burger, maybe Jazz, but I don't really. I'm gonna stick with just Uri Perez, Jake Burger, and I don't think Sandy's tradable until he pitches in the majors again. And I think that's really about it for those that can't be touched. But for the players that are on this MLB roster, so like for a Jesus Luzardo, for a Luis Arias, for a Josh Bell, I think Bendix is just really going to wait till some team is just, as desperate as possible and just gives in, just cries uncle. Imagine he's got group chats going with every GM in baseball right now, with every one of these pitching injuries that happen. That's a text. From Bendix, still asking for their number one prospect, or it's like, or just a very highly rated prospect by that organization. How desperate can they get? What happens? What happens if the Astros lose another starter? What happens if the Yankees lose another starter? Does that make Spencer Jones a Marlin? If the Yankees have another pitching issue, or if Cole is out for the year, would that do it? And I think the moment that whatever it is, pick an injury for a team, pick a farm system you like, whatever the moment is, that just the next big injury, and this season has been so horrifically full of them across Major League Baseball, that when the next one happens, I think that player's gone. And maybe that happens in July. Maybe that happens next week. Probably not next week. April would be weird, but you get the point. That I just think there's a cold-blooded calculus here of just waiting for the best offer, to come in. That's what happened with the Berti trade, and I think it's what will happen with any other trade, that happens this season. Which, just to wrap up, is really depressing stuff, at least in terms of for all of you who expected to enjoy baseball at the same level that you did in 2024, or to enjoy it possibly even more, that you saw things getting better. You saw the light at the end of the tunnel. You saw all the pieces coming together. And I know that many of you must have felt this way at the end of last season, because I felt this way at the end of last season. I think I wrote at least 2 articles about it for multiple platforms about there being a stable foundation. And turned out it was just another sandcastle in a long, depressing history of sandcastles and mirages perpetrated by this franchise that we love, but keeps treating us as completely disposable, just as they treat every player that's really ever been on their roster. And Marlins fans and baseball fans, deserve far better than this. Anyway, that's what I've got. That's off my chest. I promise to be super jazzed about whoever the top 5 picks in the 2024 draft are going to be. I'm going to confess to not knowing them because until a week ago, I didn't think I was going to need to know or care who they were for a couple more seasons. But anyway, 1-11, same record as the 98 Marlins. That was probably still a more depressing time to be a Marlins fan. I'm looking back on it, but I'm going to say that was about it. Anyway, until next week, I'm Sean Millerick, and this was Marlins After Dark. Go Fish.